You know, we usually think intelligence is something you're just born with. Like, some kids are naturally smart, some are average, and that's just how it is. But if you really sit with it and think about your own childhood, you start to notice something. It wasn't just what you were taught, it was how you were responded to. Because intelligence is not just about marks or memory, it's about how comfortable your mind feels when it's trying to figure something out, and that feeling is shaped very early. Think about this. A child asks a question, something simple. Why is the sky blue? In one home, the response is very quick. Don't ask silly questions. Just study what's in your book. And the child goes quiet, not because they stopped being curious, but because something inside them felt maybe this question wasn't worth asking. Now, in another home, the same question is asked, and the parent pauses, smiles a little, and says, "That's interesting. What do you think?" And now, something changes. The child starts thinking, because the brain grows when it is used, not when it is pressured. When a child is encouraged to think, the brain builds connections. But when a child is shut down repeatedly, the brain becomes careful. It stops exploring. Now imagine another moment. A child is doing homework and they get stuck. In one situation, the parent says, "Give it here, I'll do it." The problem is solved. But the child doesn't learn how to think through it. They learn, when it's hard, someone else will fix it. Now, in another same situation, the parent sits beside them, not to give the answer, but to guide. What do you think we should try first? And the child struggles a little, takes time, maybe even gets it wrong once, but then figures it out. And that feeling, that moment of "I got it," is incredibly important because that's where confidence and intelligence meet. The brain remembers that. I can figure things out. And that belief is more powerful than any answer given. Now, think about mistakes. A child breaks something, and the reaction is immediate. "What are you doing? Be careful." And from that moment, the child doesn't just learn to be careful, they learn not to get things wrong. And slowly, mistakes start to feel dangerous. Now imagine a different response. "It's okay. Let's clean it up." Now the child still understands the mistake, but doesn't feel scared of it. Because when you really look at it, intelligence is not just about knowing things. It slowly becomes a way of thinking. The way a child approaches something new, do they try? Or do they hesitate? Or do they give up quickly? That's not random. That's learned. A child is always learning, but not the way we think. They're not just learning maths or language. They're learning patterns. Very small patterns like, what happens when I don't understand something? What happens when I get it wrong? What happens when I try? And the answers to these questions don't come from words. They come from experiences. Imagine this. A child is sitting with a problem. They don't understand it. They feel stuck. Now, in one situation, they hesitate and say, "I don't get this." And the response is, "You should know this already. Why are you not understanding?" Now pause there. The problem didn't just stay a problem. It became something else. It became pressure. And the brain starts associating confusion equals stress, not knowing equals failure. So next time, the child avoids trying. Not because they can't, but because it feels uncomfortable. Now imagine the same moment. "I don't get this." And the response is, "That's okay. Let's look at it slowly." Now something very different happens. The problem stays a problem, but it doesn't become fear. And the brain learns, not knowing is okay. I can take my time. I can figure this out. And that builds something powerful because over time, these small moments start shaping abilities. Not suddenly, but slowly. A child who is allowed to think becomes better at problem-solving, reasoning, understanding patterns. not because they were forced to, but because they practiced thinking. And a child who feels safe making mistakes becomes better at trying again, exploring new ideas, handling complexity. And these are the exact skills we often associate with intelligence, but there's something even deeper than that. It's not just ability, it's belief. Some children grow up with a quiet belief, I can figure things out. And others grow up with, I might get this wrong. And this belief changes everything, because when you believe you can figure things out, you keep trying. And when you keep trying, your brain keeps growing. And what's interesting is, no one directly teaches this. No one sits and says, learn to be confident in your thinking. It just happens through small, everyday moments, through how the child is responded to, through how mistakes are handled, through how questions are received. And slowly, the child builds an internal voice. That voice sounds like, try again, you'll get it, or leave it, you won't understand. And over time, that voice becomes automatic. It shows up in exams, in decisions, in life. And that's when intelligence becomes visible, not just in knowledge, but in how someone approaches challenges. So when we talk about intelligence, we're not just talking about how much a child knows. We're talking about how their mind was trained to respond to difficulty, to confusion, to mistakes. And that training comes from experience, not just instruction. And maybe this changes how we see things a little, because instead of asking, is this child smart or not? We start asking, what kind of thinking environment did they grow up in? Because intelligence doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in interaction, in response, in small moments that seem unimportant, but slowly shape everything. And sometimes, all a child needs is not more answers, but more space to think.